All right, I want to ask you a question, but I want you to answer honestly. When you make a mistake or, you don't live up to one of the very, very high standards I'm certain you've set for yourself, how do you react? With compassion and understanding and kindness? Or with harshness and beating yourself up quite a bit? For most of my life, the latter was my choice. If I ever made the tiniest mistake or when I didn't live up to all the ways that I thought I should be, I was fantastic at beating myself up, at yelling at myself in my head, at telling myself what a failure I am and how I was never, ever, ever, ever going to get better. And strangely enough, I actually thought this would be motivating. In fact, when people would suggest to me that I should treat myself with a little bit of compassion, I thought they were crazy. Because if I treated myself nicely when I made a mistake, wouldn't that just mean that I'd be that way forever, that I would never be motivated to improve? I talk to a lot of people, and so many of us share this idea that when we make a mistake or when we don't live up to our high standards, that if we're nice to ourselves, that we're actually not going to be motivated to get better. But research shows that it's actually quite the opposite. In one of my favorite studies that I've read recently, researchers followed two groups of students. Both of those groups had failed the test. The first group said that they reacted to it with an understanding that they probably didn't study enough and treated themselves with compassion. And the second group beat themselves up a bit. The first group, the ones that reacted with compassion, actually ended up studying harder and doing better on the next try than the second group. Many of the students who reacted with this self-beating, self-flagellating, harsh self-talk actually never took the test again. So self-compassion, it turns out, is not a cop-out. It's not a way to give ourselves a pass, but it's simply a way to treat ourselves with the same care for reducing our suffering and improving well-being that we would reserve for people we care about. So I have this exercise, this little practice that I've started to use whenever I notice that I'm being really harsh to myself, and I call it reframing harsh self-talk. It's really simple. It has 3 steps. The first is actually learning to hear, learning to notice when you're being really harsh to yourself. So when you make a mistake or you just notice that you're being very self-critical, very harsh on yourself, that's your first step, actually becoming aware of the tone and the words that you're using when you talk to yourself. The second step is to pause, and I think of this pause as almost like a break. You've heard your harsh self-talk, and now you're taking a break from it. And step 3 is to think of someone that you really love. When I say this, I always think of my daughter, Mia, and I love her unconditionally. So think of someone you love very, very much. And now repeat what you just said to yourself, but as if you're talking to that person. It's amazing how the tone shifts, how our words shift, how much easier it is for us to feel compassion and kindness towards other people than ourselves. And what this practice does, especially if you stick to doing it regularly, is it teaches us that we are ourselves as deserving of our compassion and kindness as others. And again, for an overachiever, a self-proclaimed overachiever like me, learning that self-compassion actually increases motivation rather than serves as a cop-out is an important factor that I try to remind myself whenever I do this 3-step practice. So when you notice that harsh self-talk, take a pause and then do the 3 steps of noticing it, taking a break from it, and then reframing as if you're talking to someone you really, really love.